Today, on the Download Show, I'm honored to welcome Professor Sir Andrew Likierman, one of the UK's foremost voices on leadership, public governance, and corporate accountability. He's been a dean at London Business School, a senior figure in HM Treasury, and a trusted boardroom advisor to everyone from the Bank of England to Barclays. But today, we're talking about something even more timely. His new book, Judgment at Work, Making Better Choices. Now, this isn't just theory. Sir Andrew's book is the result of years of interviews with global CEOs, top civil servants, and academic research. It offers a practical six-part framework for decision-making, one that every founder, policymaker, and AI builder needs to hear right now. Let's get into it. Welcome, Sir Andrew.
Thanks very much for having me on the show.
Thank you, Merit. So what precipitated you to write this book?
Well, look, having been, as you said, in many different fields, in academic life, of course, but also in government and also in private sector, in organizations of many different sizes, it's always been clear that the quality of judgment is something that is critical for the success of any organization. And so it was being intrigued by the question of what is judgment exactly? How would you know you had it? How do you know other people have it? That got me into this field. Now, I also observed that very few people actually have written about this or talked about it. And so I was very interested to see why was that so? If this is so important, why is it not more of in currency as an idea? What I discovered was this is a very difficult thing to research, and it's taken me a long time to do. I'm delighted to have produced the book, and I hope that people will find it useful. Back to the questions of the origin, just one last point here, is it originated from my interest in performance measurement. So for a number of years, I looked at things that were difficult to measure. And this is a subject that seemed to me interesting precisely because it's so difficult to measure.
Now let's take the book and its content into the six-part framework and reflect it upon yourself. How has your judgment evolved over time across the many roles that you've had?
Well, one of the things that I set out in my framework is the importance of experience and knowledge. And I've had the privilege of working in many different kinds of organizations, and therefore have, I hope, been able to accumulate quite a lot of experience and knowledge in many different spheres. And indeed, one of the things I suggest is if you want to improve your knowledge and your experience, that actually you keep a constantly open mind. You look for the opportunities for different kinds of ways of looking at things, different kinds of ways of approaching issues. And that is one of the key elements that constitutes good judgment. So for me, it's been part of life's learning experience to have developed ideas about judgment in this way. And operating in many different fields, I've seen how other people have done it and have said, oh, that's really interesting. I wonder if it can be applied somewhere else. So that's the kind of research in action, if you like, that has underpinned this work, as well as reading the literatures for how other people have approached this, how people have approached the whole question of making difficult choices. So I hope it's the combination of that experience and also what other people have discovered in the ways that they've approached this particular subject.
Now, this goes back to kind of the age-old question, nature or nurture, right? Now, it sounds like what you're suggesting is it is learned behavior. There's a lot of nurturing. But in the body of your work, in your research, have you found just very good instinctual leaders that have extremely good judgment, or is it really all just learned behavior?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't be writing about it if I didn't think that people could learn, in a sense. So implicitly, the whole idea of putting ideas out there, saying, look, these are things you might think about to improve your judgment, implies that learning is going to be important. This doesn't mean to say that there's no role for intuition or instinct, but I deal with this in my book, and it's the result again. I read a lot of different authorities on this, And there are a lot of different views. There's no single view on the role of intuition in particular. At the one extreme, you've got people like Malcolm Gladwell in Blink, who says, look, it's very, very important. Those first 2 seconds, really critical. All the way to Danny Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow, who says, no, actually, it's a more reflective approach that you need. Your immediate approach is not likely to be well informed. Now, in between those two authorities, there are many different people taking different views. So my take on this in terms of judgment is to say intuition is actually something that is not just sort of comes from nowhere. It's your accumulated experience, which at that moment comes out when you respond to something. So my argument would be, if you've done something 50 times already and number 51 comes along, frankly, you can probably rely on your, intuition pretty well, because that's all your accumulated experience there. If you've never done something before, then your intuition is frankly a bit of a risk, because who knows whether you have the facts, whether you understand what's going on. You've never done it before. So it seems to me a question of how much risk you're prepared to take if you have no experience and want to rely on your intuition. You mentioned instinct. Now, instinct seems to me rather different, because instinct is something very animal. It's the immediate reaction we have to something. And on the whole, I don't think that is a very good guide to what we should be doing. It's a good guide to, if we instinctively feel, that looks dangerous, then that's our instinct helping us to protect ourselves, But otherwise, instinct especially for complex choices, is really a bit basic, frankly. We need more than instinct in making the choices that we do.
Interesting. Now, in this kind of new world of AI that we're going into, everyone's using ChatGPT, everyone's using DeepSeek or Perplexity. Where does judgment fall in all this?
Yeah. Well, look, I think judgment has got a very important part to play in the new world of AI. Let's just take the way in which AI is constructed itself. Somebody has to program, and programming involves judgment. Somebody has to train the data, and judgment's involved in deciding which is the relevant data to be trained, and whether you've got enough training data, what the risks are you take on where you stop, and so on. Judgment again. There's the question of data quality. That too is a matter of judgment. And then finally, there's the interpretation of what comes out. You mentioned ChatGPT. All right, I use ChatGPT. Do I rely entirely on it? Do I say what it's saying is right? No, because I've had evidence that sometimes it's not completely correct. Now, over time, you could argue that will get better. But we also know that what comes out of ChatGPT depends on the questions you ask. And you may frame the question in such a way as to be misleading to ChatGPT, so that actually it's doing the right thing, but you've asked the wrong question. So you can see lots of human intervention there in the process of AI. And then I'd argue that in this new world, where a lot of things which we had to do before ourselves, and it will now be done by AI, often better than we could do it ourselves, and that's fantastic. Think about medical interventions and how good a machine can be compared to doctors who may not be, frankly, 100% on basic things. Okay, so there, my sense is that as we increasingly rely on and are able to use artificial intelligence, the machine will do more and more of the routine stuff, the stuff that can be programmed and so on, leaving human beings to do the things that human beings are good at, one of which is exercising judgment. And if I just take an example, and I mentioned medicine, if doctors can rely on machines through AI to do things, frankly, that they did before and now don't need to do. They can spend more time with their patients doing things that doctors do really well, which is to understand the patient, the psychology of the patient, the complexity of what's going on. I mean, they're good at that. AI is not going to be good at complex issues where we go to the doctor. So I see judgment playing an enhanced role in a new world of AI.
So in theory, AI, or sorry, human judgment should be much better because AI is able to give you more facts and analysis and that type of thing. However, where I guess are the ethics around this? Is it important where basically, in the case of the hospital, there are, I guess it's still, should the hospital still be the one that says ultimately human needs to make the judgment because ethically, ultimately, it is the doctor that will be the one that's the leader and the responsible person and the person you can talk to versus you can't really ask ChatGPT, why did you make that decision?
Exactly. And I mean, it's an illustration of the limitations of AI that if you think about outsourcing ethics to a machine, well, that's, frankly, that's not a very good thing to do. Simply asking the machine to exercise ethical judgment on your behalf, what you're doing is relying on whoever programmed this machine to have programmed it in a certain way. You have no idea what's gone into that program, and you're leaving yourself very, very open to some quite dubious outcomes if you outsource ethics to the machine. Ultimately, human beings are going to be the people who have to decide these difficult ethical questions, but they can be helped in doing so by the huge power of what AI is able to offer, and freeing the medical profession, as were to do the making ethical choices, which they otherwise, at the moment, might have to rush, you know what I mean, because they're so busy doing the detailed work that potentially AI is going to be able to do for them. So you can see I'm quite cheerful about the prospects for human beings and AI. And I do think, therefore, that human beings' ability to exercise judgment is something that differentiates them from the machine and will define their role. Hence also my interest in saying we need to be more focused on exactly what judgment is and how we can improve our own.
Fantastic. Thank you for your time, Sir Andrew.
Thank you very much again for having me.